I never intended to revisit the old family homestead, but life has a strange way of circling back. When my mother called to say Great-Uncle Oliver had died, I felt more sadness than surprise. He'd been in poor health for years, living alone on that sprawling forested property, and although I'd never been close to him, a tiny knot of nostalgia unspooled in my stomach. Childhood memories of playing hide-and-seek among towering oaks, kicking through drifts of autumn leaves, and hearing the distant crack of Great-Uncle Oliver's shotgun came rushing back. He left everything to us: the house, the land, and most controversially, his stacks of notebooks. My mother wanted nothing to do with them. She found them unsettling and insisted I dispose of them or donate them to some local archive. But something about the diaries, with their scrawled handwriting and cryptic references, piqued my curiosity. So a week after the funeral, I drove up to the old place, determined to sort through his personal effects. Nostalgia and an unspoken sense of duty guided me. The house stood at the end of a long, rutted driveway lined with maples. It was October, and the leaves had started dropping in a torrent of yellows, oranges, and reds. By the time I parked, the roof and porch were buried under a thick mosaic of fallen foliage. I breathed in the cool autumn air, a slight smoky scent drifting from neighboring farmland. The place felt oddly welcoming despite its disrepair, its peeling paint and sagging shutters. Inside, the house smelled of dust, old books, and a faint whiff of gun oil. Cobwebs draped the corners, and the antique furniture stood under sheets like abandoned ghosts. After opening a few windows to let in fresh air, I climbed the narrow staircase to the second-floor study, where Great-Uncle Oliver kept his journals. The study was a time capsule. Shelves packed with worn books on hunting, local wildlife, cryptids, and obscure folklore. A large wooden desk bristled with pens, bullets, and old photographs, and atop the desk stood a neat row of notebooks, some so tattered they looked on the verge of disintegration. Each spine bore a date in white ink. I flipped through them, initially seeing mundane entries: hunting logs, notes on deer migration, local weather patterns. But toward the later years, his scribbles grew frantic. The paragraphs twisted into half-coherent warnings, references to a presence in the woods, some enormous thing he'd encountered. My pulse quickened as I read lines like, "Saw it moving under the leaves again. God help me, it doesn't bleed." He recounted a particular autumn decades ago when he fired his shotgun at something massive beyond a fallen oak, swearing it was more than just a bear or moose. He found no blood, no tracks, just piles of swirling leaves. Then, in the notebook's last pages, the pen strokes were violently pressed into the paper, letters ragged and dark. "It sleeps beneath the leaves, but it's waking up again. Every fall, the rustle in the woods grows louder, heavier. I thought the shotgun would scare it off, but bullets can't pierce it, can't even make it bleed." Chills skittered along my arms. I glanced out the study's window. The afternoon sun lit the yard, illuminating swirling leaves carried by the breeze. Shadows gathered beneath the tall oaks at the edge of the property, a tangle of rust brown and gold. For an instant, I imagined the entire carpet of leaves rising and falling in one slow breath, the land exhaling. I shook off the silly notion and turned back to the notebooks. The rest of the day, I methodically sorted Great-Uncle Oliver's papers, hoping to find clarity among the scattered thoughts. Much of his writing read like a local lore compendium, tales of phantom animals, haunted groves, and ancient presence rumored to dwell in the hills. One repeated motif was that the forest's leaves hid a secret heart each fall. In some passages he called it the silent beast or the leafy giant. I tried to rationalize it. Oliver had been a lifelong outdoorsman. Perhaps in old age he'd developed an overactive imagination. The property abutted thousands of acres of wild woodland. Maybe he glimpsed large deer herds or a moose and, in a frightened moment, invented a mythic monster to explain what he saw. The older notebooks were calmer after all, just sightings of bears and wolves, small scuffles with poachers. The mania about something not bleeding only appeared in the last decade or so, but one particular note unsettled me. "If you see it, it's already half awake." I tried burying it under a deeper blanket of leaves, raking them over the place where it sank back into the earth. But every year the leaves shift like a heartbeat. It was scrawled on the back page of a 1990s notebook in shaky handwriting. Next to it was a rough sketch, a mound of leaves, with lines indicating some large shape beneath like the outline of a gargantuan torso. The date on the entry wasn't so long ago, meaning Oliver had worried about this up to his final years. By the time evening fell, my nerves were frayed. I locked up, returned to the living room, and made myself a simple dinner. My plan was to sleep in the master bedroom and drive back to the city after finishing my sorting in the morning, but I couldn't stop replaying those lines. It sleeps beneath the leaves. Worse still, the wind outside grew stronger, sending leaves skittering and piling against the walls with a scraping hush. Around midnight I lay in bed, wide awake, straining to hear any unusual sound. The only noises were the house settling and the rustling of branches. At some point the exhaustion overtook me, and I finally drifted into a restless slumber, dreaming of endless autumn forests, a sea of leaves quivering in labored breath. The next morning I rose early and stepped out onto the back porch, inhaling the crisp autumn air. My footsteps crunched on a layer of fallen leaves, which had thickened overnight. The wind had blown them into drifts almost 2 feet high against the cabin's walls. Sipping coffee, I gazed into the expanse of forest behind the house. The trees there were older, their canopies arching high. Leaves fluttered down like confetti in the breeze. Nothing obviously amiss, just the seasonal cycle. Yet I couldn't shake a creeping sensation that the forest somehow felt. Heavy, watchful. Dragging a rake from the shed, I decided to clear the porch and yard. As I raked away the leaves, my mind drifted to Oliver's notes. The idea of an enormous being not bleeding sounded ludicrous. Still, I recalled old legends about forest spirits or the green man of European folklore embodiments of nature that slept and woke with the seasons. Could my great-uncle have fixated on such a myth? While raking near the edge of the yard, I stumbled on something solid beneath the mound of leaves. Curious, I cleared them away, expecting a rock or a tree stump. Instead, I found a patch of ground that felt different underfoot. The soil bulged slightly, and when I pressed it, it gave a spongy resistance. My breath caught. A bizarre memory of Oliver's notes about a living mound popped into my head. I forced a rational explanation. Maybe the earth was moist or hollow from rotted roots. Still, the texture was unsettling-like, pushing against waterlogged leather. I half expected to see black soil bubble up. Instead, the mound stayed rigid, yielding only a few inches beneath my boot. I jolted upright, heart pounding. Enough yard work for now. After lunch, I decided to venture deeper into the woods, see if anything might explain Oliver's obsession. I followed a faint path leading downhill toward a creek, an old route I recalled from childhood. The canopy overhead was thick, limiting the sunlight so that the forest floor felt dim and cool. Leaves lay everywhere in layered drifts, some so deep they reached my calves. My every step sent a musty smell of decay into the air. Halfway to the creek, I noticed the leaves seemed piled unnaturally high in certain areas, forming broad mounds. At first, I thought they were just wind-blown piles or maybe leftover brush piles. But these mounds were strangely consistent, almost symmetrical. With a rising sense of unease, I stepped around them, trying not to think of Oliver's sketches. Then I heard a rustling in the distance like a large animal stirring. My pulse quickened. Could be deer, I told myself, or maybe a bear rummaging for a last meal before hibernation. I paused, listening. The sound recurred, slow and dragging, almost labored. Then it stopped. I stood there, leaves swirling around my ankles, waiting for it to resume. Silence. I pressed on. As I neared the creek, the ground sloped steeply. Leaves cascaded down in thick layers, partially obscuring the water's edge. When I finally reached the bottom, I saw an upended rowboat half buried in debris, maybe something Oliver had once used. Broken branches pinned it in place. I pulled them aside and found deep gouges in the wood, as if from massive claws. My stomach flipped. A bear could do that, presumably. But these marks were odd. 5 or 6 parallel lines, each nearly an inch deep. I ran my fingers over them, feeling the splinters. A hush fell over the forest. Not a single bird call or insect buzz. The air felt dense, pressing in around me. I turned to glance uphill and was struck by how the leaves on the slope seemed to ripple, as though shifting in an unseen current. Leaves do shift in the wind, but the motion was too uniform, too broad. A wave of primal fear washed through me. Hefting a fallen branch for reassurance, I began the trek back up the slope. Every few steps I stopped to look behind me, expecting to see something monstrous ploughing through the leaves. I saw nothing, yet my nerves stayed taut. By the time I reached the house, my shirt clung to me with cold sweat. I spent the rest of the afternoon hunched over Oliver's notebooks, searching for any entry describing how he confronted this thing. Some notes referenced him shooting at the creature, describing how it stirred the leaves like an avalanche of foliage. One chilling paragraph read, "It rose up from the ground, leaves cascading off its shoulders. Its face was nothing but bark and rotting vegetation, no eyes. I shot it twice with buckshot, no blood, no recoil. It kept coming until I lit the brush pile on fire, then it sank back under the leaves and the movement stopped." This read like a campfire story, yet it was there in black ink, along with a date and location. Old Oak Clearing. That clearing was near the creek, exactly where I'd just been. Further on, another note, "I suspect it's not one creature but an amalgamation of every decaying thing in these woods. The leaves keep it hidden, keep it alive. Each fall when the leaves drop, it grows stronger, more mass to bury itself under. In spring, it's weaker, maybe dormant. But come October, it moves." An involuntary shiver travelled down my spine. If Oliver's words were more than delusion, then each fall was a feeding ground for this entity. The final scrawled line in the last notebook read, "It sleeps beneath the leaves, but it's waking up again." I slammed the notebook shut, trying to steady my breathing. The back of my neck prickled with the sensation of being watched. The old floorboards groaned as I walked to the window. Outside, the sun dipped behind the tree line, painting the sky in bruised pinks and oranges. The yard was a golden sea of leaves, but their gentle stirring in the breeze suddenly seemed ominous, like the slow expansion and contraction of a single living blanket. I told myself I was overreacting, yet I couldn't quell the fear swirling inside me. As dusk settled, I found Oliver's old hunting rifle in the closet. I checked the ammunition enough for a handful of shots. Better than nothing, though I doubted it would reassure me much if something truly monstrous lurked outside. Cooking a simple dinner felt surreal. I had little appetite but forced myself to eat. The quiet house magnified every rustle of leaves outside. Now and then a sudden swirl against the windows made me jump. My reflection in the kitchen window looked pale, eyes wide with tension. By 9 o'clock, darkness had swallowed the property. Pale moonlight glinted off the drifts of leaves, giving them a faint silvery sheen. I turned off most of the house lights, leaving a single lamp in the living room. Then I settled by the window, rifle across my lap, determined to keep watch. Hours crawled by. The occasional gust rattled branches and sent a skitter of leaves across the porch. My eyelids grew heavy, but every time I caught myself drifting off, the memory of Oliver's frantic scribbles jolted me awake. I imagined that half-rotted face rising from the ground, tendrils of leaves streaming off its limbs. Through the hush, a deep rustling noise emerged, akin to a large animal dragging itself across the forest floor. My mouth went dry. The leaf blanket along the tree line looked as if it was swelling, rising in a slow crest before settling again. My mind screamed that it couldn't be real, just some trick of the wind or a swirl of moon shadows. But the pattern persisted, rising, falling, rising, falling, like a gargantuan set of lungs inhaling and exhaling. A primal chill suffused my body. I flicked off the porch light to see if that changed my perception. In the moonlit gloom, the motion remained, a slow, rhythmic undulation among the drifts of leaves. For a second, I was certain I saw a shape under there, an enormous bulk pressing upward from beneath. My stomach flipped with raw fear. My instincts screamed to flee, pack up the truck, tear down the driveway, and never look back. But a stubborn part of me refused to yield. Oliver hadn't run. He'd confronted it, Even if that confrontation led him to madness, he tried to contain or scare away this abomination. Could I do the same? I stood, heart hammering, and approached the front door. The rustling outside intensified. It was as if it sensed me moving. Clutching the rifle, I stepped onto the porch, my knees trembling. The cold night air stung my cheeks. The moon hung overhead, illuminating the yard in shades of silver and black. Then, all at once, the leaves fell still. The silence was thunderous. My breath caught in my throat. Perhaps it had sunk back down, retreating deeper into the soil. Carefully, I descended the porch steps. Each footstep crackled on leaves, the sound far too loud in the hush. I aimed the flashlight into the yard. Nothing but a rolling sea of foliage. I took another step, scanning the ground for any sign of movement. Then the leaves parted a yard away from me as if something large beneath them had shifted. My terror spiked. I fired a warning shot into the air, half expecting the muzzle flash to reveal a monstrosity. The echo thundered among the trees. The leaves erupted in a chaotic swirl, momentarily revealing glimpses of something massive and dark beneath. Not fur or hide more, like clusters of rotting leaf matter and fungal growth, heaving in a single mass. Then, in a blink, it sank downward, the leaves collapsing around it. The yard was still again. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the rifle. I stumbled backward up the porch steps, never taking my eyes off the place where it vanished. My mind reeled with confusion and dread. It doesn't bleed. It's not even flesh. It's made of leaves, decay. Adrenaline coursed through me, but also a wave of nausea. I retreated inside, locking the door, flicking on every light. Sleep was impossible. For the rest of the night I huddled in the living room, listening to the slightest whisper from outside. Dawn came slowly, the first rays of sunlight filtering through the grimy windows. I felt hollow, as though I'd aged a decade in one night. But the morning light brought a shred of courage. I couldn't just cower. Oliver had mentioned using fire. Could that be the only way to drive it off? I remembered he wrote about burning brush piles where it emerged. Something about flames seemed to repel it. Maybe it was a primal reaction fire devouring the leaves that served as its camouflage and flesh. My stomach twisted at the thought of setting large fires, but if it was the only defense, I had to try. By noon, I'd gathered kindling and old branches in a metal wheelbarrow. My plan: if I saw the creature's mound shift, I'd ignite a bonfire near it. Risky, given how many dry leaves lay around, but the alternative was worse. The sky was overcast now, a dim midday gloom. The forest beyond the yard seemed to press in as if listening. I circled the property, sprinkling water around the perimeter to wet down the leaves a bit, hoping to prevent an all-out forest fire. The process felt surreal, a half-baked ritual. Yet fear drove me forward. Once I was reasonably prepared, I stood watch again. Hours ticked by with no sign of movement. Perhaps it was dormant after last night's disturbance. Late afternoon found me at the tree line, searching for the old oak clearing from Oliver's notes. Eventually, I spotted a massive oak stump, ringed by an unusually thick accumulation of leaves. Broken branches stuck out like jagged spears. Near the base of the stump, the leaves mounded up in a suspicious heap. I stood there, the hair on my arms standing on end. The pile looked thick enough to hide an entire car underneath. As I inched closer, a faint vibration rippled through the leaves. My heart pounded. The mound began to tremble, small eddies swirling across its surface. I flicked the lighter, igniting a rag soaked in lighter fluid, and tossed it onto a prepared stack of branches I'd dragged along. The flame caught quickly, crackling up the dry wood. At first, nothing happened. Then a deep shudder passed through the leaf pile. Suddenly, the leaves parted, revealing a grotesque mass beneath, like a cluster of wet, decaying foliage entwined with soil and fibrous roots. The smell was overpowering, an earthy rot that made me gag. The mass heaved upward, forming a vague shape as if trying to stand or extend a limb. My vision blurred with terror. The bonfire roared to life, dancing flames that illuminated the oak clearing in flickering light. The creature convulsed, sending leaves spiraling in every direction. A low, resonant rumble emanated, not exactly a roar, but more like the grinding of logs in a forest floor. Gritting my teeth, I shoved another burning branch toward the mound, trying to cast the flames closer. Sparks leaped onto the edges of its mass. In an instant, the beast recoiled, the leaves thrashing as if trying to smother the flames. A foul hiss echoed, and for a moment I glimpsed a gaping opening at the center like a mouth, formed of twisted, rotted leaves. Then the entire shape lurched backward, collapsing into itself. Leaves tumbled in a torrent, burying the area in swirling chaos. The bonfire's flames coughed and flickered under a sudden avalanche of leaves, but the heat persevered, igniting them. Smoke billowed, stinging my eyes. I stumbled away, coughing, tears streaming. The air was thick with sparks and ash. Through the swirling leaves I saw the creature sinking deeper into the earth, as though retreating. The ground shuddered beneath my feet. A deafening silence followed. The swirling leaves fell away, revealing only a scorched patch and smouldering embers. The mound was gone. I collapsed to my knees, still clutching a smouldering branch. My entire body shook with the realization of what I'd just witnessed, some ancient, rotting entity forced back by flame. But was it truly gone, or merely wounded? Night came on faster than I expected, and I retreated to the house, trembling with exhaustion. The place felt no safer, but at least I had walls around me. That night, I dozed fitfully, half expecting to see the windows fill with swirling leaves. But aside from a normal breeze drifting across the yard, no monstrous movement stirred. Maybe the conflagration had driven it deeper underground. In the morning, I ventured out to survey the damage. The oak clearing bore blackened earth where the bonfire had burned. Leaves were scattered in chaotic drifts, though they no longer formed suspicious mounds. I pressed a boot against the soil, finding it cool and firm. No spongy give. Strangely, the forest felt lighter, as if a subtle pressure had lifted. Birds flitted among the branches, chirping. I saw a pair of squirrels scamper over a stump. For the first time since arriving, the place seemed alive in a normal sense, not overshadowed by some hidden dread. Back at the house, I packed my belongings. My rational mind demanded I leave, never to return. Part of me knew that if the creature survived, it might surface again next autumn. But another part of me felt compelled to stay longer, to ensure the threat was gone for good. Ultimately, caution won. I loaded the truck. Before I drove off, I paused one last time with Great Uncle Oliver's final notebook in hand. Flipping to the last page, I scrawled my own final entry under his. I saw it. I fought it with fire. It retreated. If it remains beneath the leaves, let future generations remember. It does not bleed. It only sleeps, waiting for the next fall. Burn the leaves if it rises again. I placed the notebook on his desk, took a long look at the property, then closed the door behind me. Months passed. I moved on with my life, returning to the city, working my day job, trying to forget the horror I'd witnessed. But as summer waned into early fall, I found myself unable to sleep. My dreams were filled with swirling leaves and a gargantuan presence breathing beneath them. Finally, in late September, I received a call from a local caretaker who'd been hired by my mother to watch the property in my absence. He sounded uneasy. "There's something strange in those woods," he said. "The leaves piled up real thick, and sometimes at dawn I swear they move on their own." My stomach twisted. He asked if he should burn them. I hesitated, recalling the destructive power of that fire. Did we risk a forest fire each year, or was that the only solution? My hands shook as I clutched the phone. In the background, the caretaker's radio crackled with static, as if the forest itself was listening. Eventually, I told him, "Rake them, bury them far from the house if you see something. Unnatural, light a controlled fire. Be careful, and if it gets bad, leave. Immediately." He agreed, though I could hear the doubt in his voice. After the call, I stood by my apartment window, watching city traffic stream below. All around me, it was a normal day. Yet the memory of that massive form in the oak clearing haunted my mind. I could almost feel the forest's hush, the rotted leaves stirring in a slow, laborious breath. I realized with a cold certainty that this was a burden my great-uncle had tried to shoulder alone. Now it had passed to me, and perhaps to anyone who set foot on that land each autumn. The sleeping thing beneath the leaves wasn't just a delusion. It was real, an ancient anomaly that thrived on the cycle of decay. Fire might push it back, but as long as leaves fell, it would always have a new blanket. No matter where I went, a piece of that nightmare stayed lodged in my mind. A rustling sound in every breezy evening, a swirl of leaves on every city sidewalk that made me jump, because I knew deep down the sleeping shape would stir again. Whether this year or the next, or decades from now, the woods would breathe once more. Under those drifts of autumn leaves, it awaited the perfect moment to wake fully, and no shotgun, no bullet, no frantic prayer could make it bleed. It was older than bullets, older than reason, a silent, breathing terror buried under leaves.